Have you ever felt like God is silent, like hope has abandoned you, and yet you must keep walking forward? Tonight, we follow a story of a man who faced impossible odds, whose faith was tested, and yet something miraculous happened. Will you watch closely and see how hope can survive even the darkest nights? A dark storm rages over jagged cliffs. Waves crash violently below. A lone figure stands at the edge, drenched, trembling, staring into the abyss. Thunder cracks. Camera zooms in on the figure's determined eyes, fade to black. This is the story of Elijah, a man chosen by God, but not shielded from doubt, fear, or despair. A prophet, yet a human, a man who stared into the emptiness, wondering if his calling would ever matter. Elijah walked through the hills of Israel, a land divided, a people weary, and a king who worshipped idols instead of the God of his fathers. Yet Elijah's heart was not empty. It burned with a quiet faith, a whisper of hope even when the world around him seemed to crumble. Hope, like fire, must be guarded, and sometimes it seems almost impossible to keep alive. God called Elijah from a place of quiet, and yet he sent him into chaos. The king, Ahab, had led the people into worshiping false gods, filling the land with fear and injustice. Crops failed, rivers dried, the people despaired. Elijah was alone. The weight of an entire nation rested on his shoulders. One man against armies of doubt, fear, and anger. Have you ever felt like your faith alone isn't enough? Elijah did too, and what happened next would change everything. God whispered a plan to him, not in crowds, not with thunder, but quietly. "Go to the brook Kerith," God said, "and there," he promised, "I will sustain you." Elijah obeyed, and for a moment, hope returned. Water flowed. Ravens came with food. Life persisted in the midst of famine. Even when God provides, the path is never without trials. Soon, the famine would worsen, and the world would demand a choice: fear or faith. Elijah stood alone before hundreds. The people watched, their hearts heavy with doubt. The prophets of Baal danced and shouted, trying to make their God appear. Fire did not fall. Sweat dripped. Fear crept in. Elijah, a single man, stood calmly, laying out his challenge. 2 altars, 1 God, 1 fire, 1 truth. The people held their breath. History itself seemed to hinge on this moment. Could a single man's faith still move heaven itself? Elijah's answer would come in fire, literal fire from the heavens above. Elijah prays. The camera tightens on his hands. His eyes are closed. Tension builds. Silence. Then a sudden flash of lightning. Fire consumes the altar, the offering, the wood, even the stones. The crowd falls to their knees, awed, shaking. God had spoken. Hope was not gone. Faith was alive. Comment below if you've ever felt like hope was lost, because Elijah's story is about to show that even in the darkest times, God has a plan. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside Elijah's heart. Even after the fire fell, doubt whispered in the shadows. "Am I really enough?" he asked silently. God's voice was calm but firm. "You are never alone. I am with you." Elijah's journey was far from over. The famine still raged across the land. Villagers whispered, fearful of the king's anger. Elijah walked through empty streets, the heat pressing down. Every step was heavy. Every face seemed hopeless. Yet he continued. He carried the message of God, even when it seemed impossible to deliver. One day, God spoke again. "Go to Zarephath. There you will find a widow who will provide for you." Elijah obeyed, though his stomach was empty and his heart weary. He approached a small, crumbling house. Smoke curled from the chimney. A woman was gathering sticks, her eyes tired. Elijah called to her, "Please bring me some water and a piece of bread." She looked at him with suspicion. Her pantry was almost empty. "I have only a handful of flour and a little oil," she said. "I was gathering it to make one last meal for my son and me." Elijah smiled gently. "Do not be afraid. God says your jar of flour will not run out, and your jug of oil will not fail until the day He sends rain." The woman hesitated, but faith can be contagious. She obeyed. She gave him the last of her food, and as Elijah had promised, the flour did not run out. The oil did not fail. Every day they were sustained. Even in the smallest, most desperate moments, God provided. Elijah watched the boy grow ill one day. The widow's son fell to the ground, lifeless. Elijah's heart broke. He cried out to God, "Why? Why must this happen?" God answered not with thunder, but with guidance. Elijah stretched himself over the boy. He prayed, and miraculously the boy gasped and came back to life. Faith had brought hope from the edge of despair. The widow wept, hugging her son. Elijah smiled quietly, knowing that God's power can turn the darkest hour into a moment of life. Even when all seems lost, God's timing is perfect. Life can bloom where we see only ashes. Have you ever felt like giving up completely? Remember Elijah at Zarephath, standing in the face of death, hunger, and despair, and witnessing life returned. Even the smallest act of obedience can unleash miracles. Elijah continued his journey across Israel. Every village, every barren field, every despairing heart became part of his story. Each challenge tested his faith. Each miracle restored hope. The people began to notice. Whispers turned into awe. Doubt turned into curiosity. Faith inspired faith. Elijah learned something powerful. Hope does not depend on the absence of trials. It grows in the heart of those who continue to follow God, even when the path is dark. Elijah climbed to Mount Carmel once more, his heart heavy but determined. The wind howled around him, carrying whispers of fear from the people below. He looked at the sky, dark, endless, silent. He whispered, "Lord, show them you are still here." Lightning cracked through the clouds. Fire roared down from heaven. The altar blazed in pure light. The people fell to their knees, trembling. Tears mixed with rain as they cried, "The Lord, He is God." For a moment, the entire nation witnessed what hope looks like when it's set on fire. Elijah stood there, rain soaking his cloak, eyes closed, smiling through exhaustion. The drought was over. Faith had returned. Hope was alive again. But God wasn't finished teaching him yet, because true faith isn't built on miracles. It's built on trust. Days later, Elijah fled into the wilderness. He sat under a lonely tree and whispered, "Lord, I've had enough." He was tired, afraid, alone. But then, a gentle breeze brushed against his face, and in that soft whisper, he heard God's voice again. "Get up, Elijah. I'm not done with you." Elijah opened his eyes. The sky was clearing. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peace. That's when he understood. God never left. He was there in the storm, in the silence, in the waiting. Even when Elijah had lost hope, hope hadn't lost him. And maybe that's what God is saying to you right now. You might feel unseen, unheard, forgotten, but the same God who lit the fire on Mount Carmel still burns within you. Your story isn't over. Your miracle isn't finished. And your hope is not gone. If this story moved something inside you, don't let it fade. Keep it alive. Tap that like button if you believe hope still wins. Drop a "God is faithful" in the comments to declare your faith out loud. And make sure you subscribe, because we tell stories just like this. Stories that remind the world that God still works in impossible ways. Every view, every share, every comment spreads light in a dark world. Someone out there needs to hear this. Someone who's losing hope right now. You could be the reason they find it again. Share this video. Spread the message. And remember, Even when the fire fades and the world goes silent, God still speaks, hope still breathes, and your story is still being written.